right, we're here at my VermiHut indoor worm bin, and today is worm graduation day. We're going to be checking on the last feeding, but each of these trays within this VermiHut worm tower is moving onto their next phase of production. So I want to show you how I take these trays off and set them to the side, and I also want to show you what it looks like underneath when these trays come off. So the first thing we're going to do is take our empty tray that we have, and we're going to set it up to move these trays on top of it. So what I have here is some newspaper that I just kind of put on top, and then this allows me to put these trays right on here. Now we have 4 trays here. This is the top feeding tray. This one right underneath it is the pre-harvest tray, and these 2 below it are just inoculating trays that I've filled with shredded cardboard and newspaper, and they're just kind of sitting there waiting. These top 2 are really the main focus. So what we're going to do is we are going to take everything but the bottom tray and we're going to put it over here. So let me do that right now. And they are really heavy. This is probably about 30 pounds right here. So I just set that over here onto that empty feeding tray. And this right here is the last bottom inoculating tray. So I'm just going to fluff it up a little bit. And it looks like we took a little bit of the cardboard shreds and newspaper shreds along with us. So we'll make sure that we get those back in there. Now this is a little bit moist because we had some heating problems the last time, or really we had cooling problems. My air conditioner broke. So let's just take a peek underneath this one and see if it's wet under here. And it looks like we have a little bit of worms and pretty dry under there. So after we're done, I'm going to take care of all this, but let's go ahead and continue with our feeding. And those worms will be fine down there until I put them back up here. So I'm just going to fluff this up. All right, now that we've kind of fluffed that up, I'm going to take this top feeding tray, which is going to become the pre-harvest tray, and I'm going to put that on top of here. And when I do that, I want to show you all the worms that hang down from it. And what I try and do is hold it for a little bit and kind of let them come up. But then I just set it right back down on here and they're fine. So here we go. All right, and let me try and show you the worms underneath. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and set that right down on here. And now we'll check our last feeding. So I am going to move this out of the way, and we will put that on top of our next feeding zone. So here is our latest top feeding tray, and this over here is our pre-harvest tray. We will harvest that today a little bit later on in the video. So let's go ahead and look inside here. Now within here, we put down some apples and some lettuce, tomatoes, strawberries, just kind of a normal feeding. We also put down a little bit of shredded cardboard and lots of worms. Here's a little worm ball around something. Now, what we also had all throughout was all kinds of bananas that they hadn't got to from the last feeding before this one. And that was the one where the bin had heated up and then my air conditioner broke. We ended up having to get a new one, and the bin got all the way up to 99 degrees in the center and 90 on the outside. But none of the worms tried to flee, and they all turned out a-okay. So let's just kind of look around, see if we get any more of those banana peels. All right, this right here looks like it is the mango seed that we had in here from a few videos ago where we compared apples to mangoes. So I'm just going to set this to the side, and I'm going to put this in our new active feeding tray. Okay, so it looks like we just found a few pieces of paper. I didn't even see any whole banana peels. This might be a bit of a banana peel, but they really ate through everything that was in there. And then of course we have a little bit of a tomato skin. It takes them forever to eat that. But I'm gonna go ahead and bury this in here. Now, just to kind of give a timeline of how long this had been on top, it was on top for 65 days and it got 6 feedings. So that's about how long my trays are in each phase of their life in this VermiHut tower. So now what we're gonna do is we are gonna put the new top feeding tray on top of here. And it is the oldest inoculating tray that we had sitting on the bottom. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, a good section of the most bottom inoculating tray is sticking on the end of that, and that's okay because that will go underneath. And as you can see, there's probably a little bit less worms. I can't see it with my eyes, but a little bit less worms. One, because it is an inoculating tray, but also because it was sitting on that dry newspaper over to the side here. So let me just kind of lift this up and get some of this newspaper and shredded cardboard off the bottom. All right, I've managed to spread that around a little bit so that everything's level. And let me just take this pre-harvest tray off, the one that we're gonna harvest today, and take it off. And I'll show you if there's any worms underneath it. Again, I can't see, the executive producer can. And she says there's worms? Mm-hmm. Yes, there's worms. Okay, again, we're gonna put those on the newspaper right here. And this right here is our new active top feeding tray. So we've got a new top feeding tray. Underneath that, we've got a new pre-harvest tray, which was the one on the very top at the very beginning of this video. And then we've got the one down below that has been on the very bottom since we started. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in here and kind of fluff things up. Now, when I put it in here, it was filled almost all the way to the top. So the weight of the trays have kind of smashed it down and it has absorbed some water. So this is just a perfect moisture to start feeding with. Now, some of it suggested maybe I put some risers in the corners to try and lift it up. And that's actually a good idea. I just didn't have anything to give that a try with. But the design of the VermiHut is that they kind of sit right down on top of each other so that there's not too much of a gap between the trays there. So let me just continue to fluff this up and then we will feed it. All right, so this inoculating tray has been on the very bottom for just a little over 2 months. So you can see without me doing anything, just putting dry shredded cardboard and newspaper, it already has some worms in it and they're already made some castings. So this tray is just teeming with microbes and it is ready to just absolutely go through any kind of food that we put in here. So we are going to do a normal feeding here and we are going to lay down some bedding and then some food. So first things first is we put down some shredded cardboard and this shreds real well. I've got a micro cut, cross cut 12 sheet shredder that shreds up the cardboard really good. And this is corrugated cardboard in here. I've got affiliate links if you're interested in seeing what it looks like and the different prices. But I really love how this just absolutely shreds cardboard. We'll put a little bit more down because we are trying to bulk this up and give us a bunch of castings. So the goal with this first feeding is to really entice the worms from underneath this tray to come up and eat from the new top feeding tray. So I'm gonna put in some of their favorite foods, and one is watermelon that we'll just kind of put right there. I also have some mango pieces and then some strawberries. I also have some celery, and I've got a little bit slower food like a piece of apple. Here's another piece, a tomato, carrot, but all kinds of good food that will entice them to come up from the bottom and fill this tray right here. Got another great save by the executive producer. There's the mango seed. And then something I also like to do is I clean up my pantry and I find some grains, pulverize them and put them in. This is some pulverized oats, just another food source for them. And then I'll take our spent coffee grounds, put them in this container and they dry out a little bit. And then I'll add them in as another food source. Spread this out a little bit. I don't like it to bunch up too much for them. And then the next thing we do is we add a little bit of pulverized eggshells, and this is grit for them to digest their food. They use it to grind up the food that they eat, and it just kind of makes it smaller instead of having digestive juices like we have. So now we're just going to bury this feeding under here like this, and the next thing we're going to do is harvest our last tray, our pre-harvest tray that you see over here to my right. And the way I do that is unique to this VermiHut. I don't harvest it any other way in any of my other bins, just with this VermiHut. And that's because each one of these trays has holes. In fact, I counted by doing some multiplication, and it has over 1,000 holes underneath it for the worms to go up and down. And those holes are a little bit less than 1/4 inch. And what that ends up doing for us is creating a sifter out of these trays. So I kind of do a reverse sift. What I do is I put the tray on top and then I agitate what's in there and the worms crawl down. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so again, here is the pre-harvest tray that is now going to be harvested, and it's going to be harvested by us agitating it. And I want you to notice over here, you saw all those worms hanging down from the trays, but when I put this newspaper on here, it's very dry, and again, underneath it is just an empty tray. When I put the newspaper on here, they feel that and they go right back up into the tray that they were in. So again, I just want to reiterate, this is kind of canted 45 degrees so that when I put those trays on, it sits up and there's just 2, 4, 6, 8 touch points for those bins. So it's not like I'm crushing the worms. All right, let's come over here and let's start agitating. And what I do is I take about a minute or so and I agitate this part right here. The worms do not like it and they try to dive down. And when they dive down, they go down into these holes into our new top feeding tray. So after I've agitated it for about a minute, I'll wait anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes and come back and agitate again. And after each agitation, I get fewer and fewer worms. In fact, if you want, you can kind of take the top layer off after each agitation and you'll get fewer and fewer worms down here. And then the worms kind of self-sift and what you're left with is castings. Now I'm finding just a little bit, this looks like a tomato peel paper. I'm finding, looks like a banana stalk and some stuff like that. I'll pull that out. But for the most part, these are just looking like beautiful castings. So let me finish agitating and then we'll let the worms die down. Then I'll come back and we'll agitate and then we'll keep that up until we have very few worms in here at all. All right, it's been about 10 minutes, so we're just gonna agitate again. And as you can see, this top layer, there really aren't too many worms in it. As I go down a little bit more, we're gonna start to see some. But again, I'm agitating them and making them not happy so that they do what this worm right here is doing, which is try and go down that hole right there. You can see it went right down the hole. So we'll just keep doing this, just kind of lightly agitating them, letting them know that this is not the place to be at all and that they should hightail it down there. All right, let's go for another 10 minutes. All right, it's been about 10 minutes since our last agitation, and I'm just gonna take some of these bigger things and I'm going to put them in here so that we can add them to our new top feeding tray. Grab those and then let's agitate one more time. Again, I'm finding fewer worms, which is good. We are seeing less. They kind of like to go on the side, so that's where I typically see some as we get further and further along. And what I'm gonna do after that, after we're done agitating, is we are going to take our Cocoon nursery and we are going to empty it into our storage container and we will put all these castings into that Cocoon nursery. But I'm not gonna bore you with that. This video is already long in the tooth. So we are just gonna agitate and we'll do one more 10-minute rest time, letting them go underneath, and then we will button everything up. All right, so that was 3 total agitations and resting periods for them to go down. So I'm just gonna take off a little bit of this top stuff that I'm gonna put in the current top feeding tray. And the next destination for these castings right here is inside this Cocoon nursery. And everything that's inside here is gonna go into my storage. So let's go ahead and take this off. And I will put those in my Cocoon nursery off camera. And let's go ahead and put a top feeding on here. And you can see some of the worms that have crawled down from that harvesting tray. And once again, thank God for the executive producer. Let's put this in there. Oop, little piece of plastic. There we go. And let's add some pulverized oats to the top. I found that they take care of these in about 2 to 3 days. And I think it's just one more thing to help them come up from the bottom trays. So there we go. They have had a great graduation. We're just gonna put their graduation cap on and that will complete our rotation of our trays. And the rotation takes about 60 days for each tray. So every 60 days, I've got about 10 pounds of castings that come out. And actually, I want to put this, I think, this way. So yeah, so every 60 days, I get 10 pounds of castings. So if you just got a VermiHut, you start putting your trays on. Eventually, you'll get to the point where every 60 days, you're churning out castings. So that is fantastic. So I hope everybody's doing good. I hope everybody's worm bins are doing real well. So happy vermicomposting, everybody. Take care now.